Welcome, welcome to the practice session of on parajumbles. As you know, the idea and the agenda of these sessions are simple. They are targeted to for the IBPS 2018 upcoming exam. And what are we supposed to do in these sessions? Our target is to acclimatize ourselves with actual questions and practice those questions that have come in the IBPS PO or other relevant exams in the past. And also in what way, in what methodology we will move forward. We are going to attempt these questions as a test. These questions, as I told you, would be based on previous year questions. And while taking test, you are supposed to pause the lecture for the time that has been shown in the timer column. The timer column is at the right hand side top of the screen, and there will be a timer column. You just need to stop your lecture for that amount of time for that particular question. Okay, relevant? Understood? So that's how you will take the test. Now what is it supposed to do? It will give you the actual feel of exam. In this particular set of question, the amount of time that you need to put in, that's also something that will be able to know or understand when you do these questions in this way, right? And at the end of at the end of your test, we will discuss the detailed solution of these questions. So each one of our classes in this series of IBPS PO 2018 for IBPS PO 2018, the previous year questions discussion. In this series, you will take around 10 to 12 questions for each one of these topics and discuss them in each class. So today's topic is parajumble. So let's start off and take the test first. There will be a two parajumble set of 5 questions each, 10 questions. Let's see how much can you score. All the best for the tests. Let's start off. First, the instructions. Question number 1 to 10. Rearrange the following sentences to form a meaningful paragraph and answer the question below. So, the first question, set of 5 questions in front of you. 3 minutes, pause the lecture for 3 minutes and solve this piece. Done? Now, okay, so now let's move on to the next set. Question number 6 to 10 in front of you. Pause the lecture for 3 minutes and solve these questions. Done? Chalo, let's move on to the next slide. Concept of parajumble, because before we move on to discuss each one of these questions, the solution behind these questions, we will have an idea about how do we approach these questions. Essentially, these are questions where you don't have options of parajumble, right? So you'll have to solve it and you'll have to make the whole parajumble by yourself, and then only you will be able to go to the questions and answer them, right? So let's look at the technique, the concept. When I have what is a parajumble? Parajumble is nothing but there is a group of sentences. Now, in an actual paragraph, they will be in an order 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in this order. Let's say. Now, I jumble this order. I rearrange. I jumble this order in a way so that their logical flow is disrupted. So I put 3 first, then I put 1, then 4, then 5, then 2. So what happens is that now this set of sentences does not make a logical flow, right? So now what I need to do is that I need to reorient it to its original logical flow. So that's why they are, say, sentence rearrangement or parajumble questions, right? So essentially, what are we supposed to do in that? We'll have to identify the first sentence. Now that's one of the steps. The first step, identifying the intro statement. And then the next step is to identify whether in the group of this disoriented set of sentences, is there any mandatory pair or mandatory triplet? Now, what do we mean by mandatory pair and mandatory triplet? Mandatory pair or mandatory triplet means that a group of sentences that seems to be very closely connected to each other in such a way that one has to come after the other. For example, let's say we are able to identify that this sentence 2 has to precede this sentence 3 for different reason. I mean, maybe there is a keyword that has been used in 3 which is closely associated with 2. Maybe there is a there is a cause effect relationship that has been displayed. So in various ways that can happen, and the more you are if you are a good reader, the more you have read, the better you become at identifying these mandatory pairs and triplets. So I know for sure that 2 3 is going to be one of the mandatory pairs. So 3 would come after 2 in any set of circumstances. Now what happens due to that, and what is the advantage as a question solver that we get due to that? The advantage that we get is that when I look at this mandatory pair, I am now set up in the 5 sentences order. I already know the order of one pair of sentence. So hence, making it as a reference base, I can put in the others either prior to it or later it can follow or it can precede, right? So we can make our strategy of finding out the right order of sentences by taking this mandatory pair as a reference point. So it helps if I am able to identify a mandatory pair or a mandatory triplet, then it helps us to solve the question in a more accurate manner. Now, eliminate through redundancy check. So there are options that, let's say for example, you come across 1 2 3 5 4 and 1 2 3 4 5. Now you're not able to I mean, these are the two things that you are not able to decide on. So sometimes there, what happens, you see that if I use 5 before 4, the utility of 4 diminishes. The utility of 4 is not there, right? But on the other hand, if I use 4 before 5, then everything is fine. So then on the basis of redundancy check, this is called redundancy. If the utility of one sentence cease to exist if the order of the sentences are reversed or changed, then you are facing a redundancy case, superfluous case, a case where one sentence becomes not important. Secondly, identifying the flow of the passage. When you look at the identifying the flow of the passage, when everything fails, or even if you are able to identify one mandatory pair but it is not enough for you to arrive to a particular solution like 1 2 3 4 5, what do? You try to understand the story in its totality and piece in the characters and the events of the story in such a way so that they follow one after the another, right? So that's the last step, right? For example, if you look at the look at the concept of parajumble that I am professing you, the identifying the flow of the passage is the last step. Now why is it so? Because if I am able to do it in easier ways, why would I take the longer route? Though this is the best route. If you understand the passage and you are able to order the paragraphs in a logical whole, that's the best way of doing it. But it takes time. And in a competitive exam like IBPS 2018, where you'll have 20 minutes for 30 questions, this time is a privilege that you might not have. So what do? You innovate yourselves, and therefore these concepts of parajumbles help you in innovating and finding out ways of doing these questions faster. Now let's look at the questions. Now, if you look at these types of questions, what is this type of question? This type of question has no option. Now, you might ask me, why, sir, there is no option? There is option here. Now, yes, there is option here as such as far as, it is asking what is the fifth sentence, what is the first sentence. Now, you don't have option in terms of the whole parajumble. For example, there is no option like A, B, D, C, E or C, A, B, D, E. Now, what is the difference between this kind of options and this kind of option? The difference between these two kinds of options are that in this kind, we cannot use we essentially cannot use the options to help us answer the questions. But in these kind of questions, in these kind of options, there is a chance of being able to use the options itself as a part of the resource of the question and help us to arrive to a particular solution. So that's the difference. So how do we approach that difference? Simple. We need to find out the right order of sentences here, and then only we can move forward and answer the questions, right? So let's look at the right order here. When I go through you all have gone through the sentence, so I'm not going to read the sentence per se. I'll just give you the logic behind which one would come where and why. the India has to be concerned about climatic changes. Now, if this sentence is, if you have gone through all the 5 sentences, it is one of those sentences which is not directly related to what is being talked about in A, B, D, E and F. Because if you look at A, B, D, E and F, all of them are talking about climate change and other adaptation in general. Whereas this particular thing is talking about India, specifically India, right? How it is going to relate to that. So when there is the sentences like this which are not directly fitting into the scheme of things, can be in only two positions. What are they? Either the first sentence or the last sentence. Either the first sentence or the last sentence. Why? Because if I put them in the middle, the order, the flow of the narration will be hindered, hampered. Okay, right? So that's one thing. So I'll keep C as it is. I don't know. I'll just keep it there. But then I'll move forward and see if I can find out any short mandatory pair. So let's look at this. F, since there is a possibility of adverse impact on agriculture which could deter growth, right? I don't know whether you would agree with me or not, but then since has to come after something. But then in parajumble there is another problem. This is a part of a larger paragraph. So it's a part of a larger paragraph. I don't know whether this since has been used for something which is precedes this paragraph or it is inside this paragraph, but still we'll move on and see whether we are able to identify. Now D is something that is definitely a reference to the impact that has been talked about so much in this paragraph, and this impact has to be that reference, that pronoun to be created for this impact in here, because if you look at if you look at impact, it is only talked about in here, because here we move on to multiple impacts. Here we are moving on to multiple impacts. So if you see closely through the pronoun reference that you have, you might come out with FD as a mandatory pair, right? Now I am able to identify it. Maybe you can say that maybe so you have read so much, so therefore it's clicking to you. What if it does not click to me, right? That's a good enough question. So let's move forward and see whether there are other indicators or other helpful hints that can help us to solve it without even identifying the FD mandatory pair. Let's move on. Now, A and B, A, B, C is, if you look at A and E, climate change adaptation will help communities and natural system to deal with the consequences of climate change. And if you look at E, adaptation will involve gradual transformation with many small steps over time coupled with major transformation. So, this adaptation is referring to the climate change adaptation, and it's giving an extended data about how it is going to be implemented. So what it will do and how is it going to implement it? So this becomes a mandatory pair. So AE becomes a mandatory pair for sure. Now this was easy. If FD was not easy, but this was easy. A is easy. Now we're left with B. How do we place B? Hence the human race has no choice but to adapt to these impacts. Now here we are talking about adapt, which adaptation is being referred in A. So this adapt has to precede A, and also these impacts has been talked about in a sense for this impact, right? So B would be coming in between FD and AE. So FD has to precede, even if you do not know that FD is a pair, you now know for sure that B has to follow FD, and it has to precede AE. So this is now clear that one set of what do you say, if the sentence structure would be FDBAE. Now why do I put C? I told you C can be at least only come at the first or at the last. Now does C make at this point of time at the end? No, because it's if you look at the topic that C is talking about, it's climate change. So climate change, India has to be concerned about climate changes. So it's decidedly a little out of the way from the generic discussion that we are having. But if I have to put it in there, it has to be in the first or not at the last, because even if I am going from a in a more generalistic manner, C does not fit in at the end. It only fits in at the start, as if it introduces the idea of climate change. So decidedly it is different in scope when it comes to A, B, D, and F, but it is helping us to introduce this particular idea out of which FD, B, A, and E is talking so much about. Right. So that's the idea through which we arrive to this question. Now to the right one. So CFD BAE is the right order. Now on the basis of that, how do I answer the question? The fifth sentence of the passage is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. A is the fifth sentence of the passage. The first sentence of the passage is obviously C. Third one. The second sentence of the passage is F. The third sentence of the passage is D, and the last sentence of the passage is E. So you have your answers here. Question number 1 to 5 answered in front of you. Okay? Clear? Good. Very good. So let's move on to question number 6 to 10, the last set. Now here, when I look at this, what are you doing? We are seeing that what would be my methodology of answering this. So when I move forward, we'll see that the last sentence ends with one India and China got richer. One, India and China got richer. The next sentence, if I look at this way, or the preceding sentence, so far so good. So far so good. But then two things happened. See, two things happened has to be out of which one is F. One is definitely F. So one thing is for sure, whether the second thing is there or not, but CF is a mandatory pair, because C is introducing the idea of that two things happened, out of which one is India and China got richer. So CF is a mandatory pair. Now let's look at the other sentences, which can be the introductory sentence. Now if I go through the whole paragraph, I know it's talking about carbon, depletion, and the way it's going down. So carbon sinks 70% of forest cover powered almost entirely by mountain streams. Bhutan is a poster child for green living, right? So it's sort of introduces the idea of what it is being talked about. Okay, but then I'll leave it that ways, because I'll have to also look at the A. It is the only country. Now when I say it is the only country in the world that is carbon negative, which means it produces more oxygen than it consumes. So Bhutan, when I'm looking at the overall world where carbon is being emitted at a higher rate, Bhutan is something which is carbon negative. It's producing more oxygen and less carbon dioxide, whereas the other countries are doing just the opposite, therefore polluting the environment. And so that's the idea. That's the basic scheme from which this sentence has come. But then A cannot be the starting sentence. It has to be and the it that is referring to is Bhutan, and what is the issue in it that is being referred to? Obviously the less carbon percentage of Bhutan. So this makes very surely D and A mandatory pair. I don't know where DNA and C and F would be pitted together. We'll come to that later. But DA is a mandatory pair for sure. And then we go to B, Bhutan sandwich between the two most populous nations of the world. Now this has to mean India and China. So B cannot come before before CF. It has to come after CF. After CF, whether exactly after CF or not, we'll see. Because now the last sentence, glaciers are beginning to melt, flash floods and heavy rains and even droughts are common, and the temperatures are climbing. So these are the negative effects, listing of negative effects, and these are the negative effects that are referred to in here, suffer for their sins. So how is Bhutan suffering for India and China sins? They are suffering for India and China sins by by looking at, see, their glaciers are beginning to melt and flash floods are happening. So when this is B and E is a mandatory pair for sure. So I am looking at a case where CF is being followed by BE. Now where do I place DA? Would DA come before CF? Will DA come between CF and BE, or will DA come after B? Now let's see. DA talks about in general how carbon is and how Bhutan is better at carbon management. Now that is definitely going to come before we introduce the concept that how other people's misadventures are causing problem for Bhutan, and what are the problems being that has been created for Bhutan. So D has to precede CA. So therefore, what is our right order? DA, C, F, B, E. That's our right order. So this is our right order. Now let's look at the answers now. We know what is the right order. Now let's look at the answers. The first sentence in the passage is obviously D. The third sentence of the passage is C. The last sentence of the passage is E. The fourth sentence of the passage is, where is F? Where is F? F. And the second sentence of the passage is, where is A? Where is A? A. Right. So these are the answers that we have for this question. 2, 3, 5, 1, 3. Okay. So these were the answers. Sure. And so now, you got the idea how we are to approach these questions. Admittedly, these questions are difficult when it comes to a question where you already have the options in terms of the right order. So if you have option like DA, CF, BE, BD, CA, FE. So what you can do is you can compare. And when you compare, you get a better sense and a better idea of which is better fitting rather than, and which is not. But in these kind of sentences, you don't have that privilege of having an option, and therefore you need to decide by yourself. The whole stuff you need to decide by yourself, right? Okay, so let's so that was the sentences. Those were the paragraphs. Those were how you need to do these parajumble questions. So what's your score? Let's check what would have been a good score in this and what would not have been a very good score in this. So let's check first. 9 to 10. See, though you have a parajumble para out here, a paragraph out here, but it is not necessary that you need to answer the whole paragraph correctly to get some of them correct. A lot of times what happens is that we did every order correct, but the last two order was mismatched. So for the first and the second and the third sentence question would be correct, but the later on would not be correct. So there is an advantage to these kind of questions too, because from only one para there are 5 questions. Even if you mismanage only one pair, even if you only mismanage only one pair, then also you will get 2 to 3 correct. But if you mismanage more than one pair, obviously you will get all of them incorrect, most of them incorrect. So what is a good score here? 9 to 10 out of 10 is a very good score here. It's a very good score here. But even if you are not able to get that, but 7, 8, you are able to get a 7 or an 8, let's say 5 in one and 3 in another. That's also an amazing score. That's not a bad score at all. 5 to 6 is something which on an average, if you are getting, there is a chance of improvement to the next level, at least to an 7 and 8 rather than 5 to, rather than this category, and you should go on trying it, right? And the last, less than 5, it essentially means that out of the 2 questions you're able to do only 1, or out of the 2 questions you did all the 2 but was correct in 2 in one, and 3 another 1 or 2 in the questions in the other. So that's a cause of concern. In such kind of scenario, in any kind of scenario, you should practice, but in such kind of scenario, practice a lot. practice questions of this nature, right? Because you see, these were the past year papers. So if you get these kinds of questions, you need to be able to identify the right order and answer the questions, and within that stipulated time. Of how much time did I give you? 3 minutes. So that's 3 minutes time is something that you would get, or you should give, because there is only 20 minutes. You cannot take 7-8 minutes to do a parajumble question. So that's 3 minutes that you get, and these 3 minutes you'll have to reorient your logic in such a way so that you are able to arrive to the right order and answer the following questions on the basis of that particular passage, right? Okay, so that's the idea behind it. If you know, the idea behind this is that if you think that it'll be helpful to go through the other lectures, there are some lectures on a channel. You can refer to them on parajumbles, how to do it, what to do, and mainly practice a lot. Okay, so that will be all for today. Next day we'll be coming on with another topic of English and doing the same thing that we had done today and the last days, right? Thank you very much and all the best.